get the value out of it more so. We tend to get a lot more on the replay. So
that sounds good.
Let's open this up, and we are now live, and let's let some people in this room, and we'll go from there.
So how long have you been doing this podcast?
I started this podcast right after, about 3 months after I had my heart attack in November of 2015. And the reason why is I've spoke all over the country. I've spoke at Jim Cochran's events, my own events, CES conferences that Jim hosted. And basically, it was a way for me to help to continue to relate to my audience and be able to reach them without having to travel while I was healing and getting over my heart attack. So that's kind of how the webinar series Pro Seller Talk was born, is because of my issues and my inability to be on a plane, because you can't be on a plane with that pressure, you know,
right,
until your heart is healed enough to be able to handle the difference in the compression of going up 30,000 feet. So
right,
that's kind of how that was born. We do have some people that are filling this room. So,
okay.
Hey guys, we're going to start this off. Hey, welcome to another episode of Pro Seller Talk. My name is John Bullard Sr. I am the host, and today I have Scott Margolius here. Scott is he's here to answer questions for you, anything related to Amazon, private label, best practices, and things like that. So we want you guys to field to him, and he will be glad to answer them. He loves to answer questions. He just told me before we went on the air that this is something that he loves doing, and that's why he's here, to be able to answer questions for you. I'm going to introduce Scott here, and I just did, and let Scott talk about himself and what he's doing and how he got started with Amazon, and you know what he's doing right now with his business, and then he'll go into, you know, you can ask questions and answers, and questions and you can answer them. Sorry, one of those days, it's been a long day for me. And he'll get into, you know, answering your questions for you. Hey Scott, welcome. How are you? Glad to have you here.
Hey, thank you. It's good to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. So on my end, I've noticed that you cut out just a little bit in terms of the bandwidth. I don't know if that's on my side or your side or both in between. I don't know if we need to do anything different to adjust to that.
Yeah, I don't see anything on my end, but I'm going to ask people if they can hear us okay.
Okay, because it's certainly cutting out for me. I don't know if I need to, you know, close my browser and start over or what, but I wouldn't want to have people have trouble the whole time.
I say it, John, broken up.
Oh, that's interesting.
Can you hear us guys now? Yeah. Can you hear us guys now? So Scott is clear and John was broken up. Want to make sure I'm still not broken up.
It's
Can you hear me better?
it's pretty jumpy.
All right. What about now? Still jumpy?
The audio just now was fine. Let's see. Yeah, they're saying that you're lagging quite a bit, and that's what I'm seeing as well.
And I'm not sure how to fix that.
When's the last time you rebooted?
Hang on 1 second. I just rebooted before I came home.
Oh, that's interesting.
How am I now? Can you hear me better now?
I think so. I mean, it's not a clarity issue for like your audio device. It's much more something having to do with the bandwidth.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that because it looks like when I go into my controls that my bandwidth seems like it's.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like something else is hogging bandwidth in your location, you know, if you were streaming music or something along those lines.
Yeah, give me a second here. I'm gonna.
Since they can hear me, I'm gonna go ahead and talk while you kind of.
Yeah, you go ahead. You go ahead and do that, and I want to see. You tell me in a second if I sound better or not.
Okay.
I'm working on some things here, so I'm gonna see if I sound better.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a bandwidth troubleshooting thing, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, so just as a way of introduction, I started selling on Amazon part-time in January of 2012, and I was sort of just dipping my foot in the water. I didn't even start as a pro seller. I thought, well, I'll just kind of wait and see how this goes. And I actually converted to being a pro seller in that first month. It already made sense where the break even was 40 items, and if you sell more than 40, then it makes sense to switch over. So I did that in the first month, and then I ended up being in the top 25% of Amazon sellers for the holiday selling season in 2012, doing that part-time. And then I was in the top 25% again in 2013, and in the top 10% in 2014. And so I actually ended up quitting my day job in 2014, and I've been there as the chief of operations for a small business for 15 years. And then I was going to just start selling full-time, but I ended up through feedbackrepair.com. I was helping other sellers here and there with issues with their feedback on their accounts, with their seller feedback, and there just came to be a point where there's more and more demand for services for sellers, where people were having just enough issues that I had the sort of skills and background and experience to be able to help with that, and kind of got to the point where I'm basically offering those services as a consultant full-time, and I'm not really doing much selling at all. I have basically sold about every single different type of sourcing that you can come across, and so I've got a lot of familiarity there. And then I continue to sell a few things that are hot items that don't make sense to give up yet, but that also keeps me sort of in the mix, so I can see all the different changes that come down the pike, and can stay in front of all that, since everything's changing rapidly all the time. So I've offered various different services as I've seen a need for those sorts of things. I've helped people with getting reimbursements for their accounts, and I've helped with ungating and brand registry, and I've helped manufacturers in terms of getting onto Amazon for the first time to be a seller. I've helped manufacturers and sellers go from and transition from 1P to 3P if they wanted to sort of get away from having there be so much that they give up with 1P, which should be selling to Amazon directly, either through Vendor Central or Vendor Express. I've participated in a lot of the programs that Amazon's rolled out. I'm sure not all of them, but Amazon Custom and Small and Light, and the latest right now that I would encourage you to look into if you're not there yet is Amazon Business, because they seem to be pushing that, and it seems to be advantageous for you and for your account and for sales and for attracting new business. I've been a part of various other programs that they've put out, and have just a good amount of familiarity with a lot of those different types of initiatives that they promote, as well as having familiarity with listing optimization, listing creation, troubleshooting various different types of issues with accounts, brand management. I mentioned map enforcement, map management for brands, and for maybe larger sellers, and for manufacturers. I've worked with a number of private label sellers in every single different category, whether that's supplements or what have you, anything that somebody's going to either manufacture or import, anything along those lines. Help people grow their accounts, protect their accounts. I end up doing a lot of work in the way of ASIN reinstatements and account reinstatements and brand restrictions, all those sorts of things. So any questions along those lines, more than happy to answer, give you as much information as you might possibly need to help you get in the right position or answer the questions that Amazon is asking of you. I can, if there's something I don't know, I can point you in the right direction, give you that resource. And I tend to help a lot of people that way as well. I end up having people find me a lot on Google, or through referral, or maybe through something like this, like a podcast, where they might see some of the things that I might be addressing on YouTube or otherwise. I have a heart for training and for helping people. I want you as a seller to be equipped to be able to, you know, work all the ins and outs of what's going on with Amazon. I strongly encourage everybody I talk to diversify their portfolio, where they're maybe only 60% of their income max would come from Amazon. I had heard Chad from Skubana talk about that one time, where it just sort of made sense to him as a rule of thumb, where, you know, if Amazon is responsible for 60% of all online sales, then it just made sense to diversify your portfolio to the point where only 60% of your income might come from Amazon, so you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. And I've seen over and over again how that is just a wise move. It's something that makes sense for you to either develop other revenue streams, whether that's Shopify or your own website or eBay or other things that you're doing on the side, or taking the income and profit and investing it somewhere other than just Amazon. I think all of those kinds of things make all kinds of sense, and I help people with those things as well. If you were to tell me, one of the things I really like is to have a relationship with my customers. I like to know where you're coming from, what your pain points are, what your background is, to be able to properly assess what's going on with your account and what makes the most sense in terms of a right fit. I really like to see people get into the things that they know, that they're passionate about, to develop their niche, to be able to do something that's far more than just a job. I mean, a lot of us we're entrepreneurs, and you've got to enjoy what you're doing. You don't want to just have drudgery where if it gets to the point where you're just shipping widgets, or you're just, you know, buying and selling stuff, if that's what it is for you, then it's not that exciting. I'd encourage you to get into something you'd be more excited about, something that you can sustain over the long term. Or, you know, if your focus is building a brand, to be able to build up your sales and your product line into something that you can sell, I think that makes all kinds of sense. There are a lot of different strategies and a lot of different opportunities, and I still think the sky's the limit in terms of Amazon. I think we're just scratching the surface for online sales and for this whole life cycle of where we are right now. So just want to open things up to questions. If there's anything out there that I can help you with, I'd much rather explain how to stay out of trouble than to be in a position of, now you're under the gun, everybody's panicked, everybody's concerned about, oh, you lost your account, when there's so many different things you could be doing to help prevent that in the first place. I think the knowledge to prevent those kinds of things are just so incredibly valuable. I'd rather share that than be in a position where now you've lost your account, you've got to get it back, and there's no guarantee of that. So I don't know if we had any questions come through.
Yeah, we have a couple. I'm not sure that the chat and us, but also, if you could give some examples. One of the questions I have is if you could give some examples of what you're talking about as being, I guess, instead of having the issues come up, the preventative things that you're talking about, some of the stuff that you're talking about as far as what they could be doing to prevent, and, you know, kind of like a preventive measures before those things happen to them.
I'll give you one example. There's a client that I've been working with who hired me to monitor and manage his reviews for his private label product, and to give the appropriate responses when necessary, and try to get product reviews removed and that sort of thing. And the issues, I mean, yes, we can accomplish that to some degree. You know, having, as most people would know, if they're private label seller, having a review removed is, you know, it's not very likely. It's not, you don't have a very good shot at doing that. There are a lot of different strategies that I like to employ that help, that we can deploy on your behalf to prevent the negative review from ever even occurring in the first place, to possibly address the existing reviews that are there, and perhaps have some of them updated, and in some cases even have them removed. But in this case in particular, the biggest trouble with his reviews with his product is his product itself, right? He didn't necessarily do the best job with testing. He didn't do necessarily the best job with the listing itself. It's selling well, but what he's just doing is creating more problems for himself every time it sells, right? Because he didn't spend enough time with R&D. He didn't spend enough time assessing all the different things that a consumer would have in mind when they receive his product. So it's got certain fundamental flaws that if I'd been involved with the whole process of development of the product from the beginning, it might not have those flaws. I would have been able to have the opportunity to assess and address and refine some of the various different issues with that product. Now, in this case, he's sort of behind the gun. You know, he's got, you know, hundreds and thousands of pieces of inventory that all have the same issue. And it's just a matter of time. It's like Russian roulette, how long it's going to be before the next customer receives this product, has the same exact problem with it, leaves the complaint in the form of a product review. And in fact, he's had at least one, if not two listings suppressed because of the high level of customer dissatisfaction. So you just end up in this sort of treacherous spot that could have been avoided. And the things that I would normally recommend to help you avoid that particular type of scenario or those issues with the product don't necessarily work all that well for him because the product's got fundamental flaws. So whether that would be changing the sequence of the autoresponder or changing the language of the template or including product insert, any of those kinds of things, or the different ways that you might approach a buyer who's left a negative review. I mean, those things are effective, but they're not nearly as effective if you don't have anything in particular that you can do to fix the problem. And in some cases, I've worked with other clients where we've been able to assess what the issues are. We've been able to do a comprehensive review of everything that customers have said about their product. We've analyzed product reviews and we've analyzed feedback to be able to determine a plan of action for what needs to be addressed or improved or changed. We've been able to go in, make those improvements, make those changes to the listings themselves, update them accordingly, maybe change the content, maybe make the description better, maybe make the images better, maybe clarify what it is that the buyer is receiving, because at the end of the day, so much has to do with buyer expectations. But what we've been able to do is come up with a new iteration of that product. So you have a version 2.0 that solved all the problems that were inherent with 1.0, and you end up being in a much better position. I've worked with another client who's been in that position, and he's a manufacturer. He launched this product. He's on the first page for his category, but it had enough issues that he decided, I'm going to go back to the drawing board, come up with a new formulation, new packaging, and try to start over again. So I helped him with that whole process, helped him with the packaging, helped him with the copy, with all those different things, suggestions for the formulation, and he's going to end up basically reinventing himself because of the experience that he had, you know, coming out of the gate the first time. And I'll tell you, he's got a professional organization. He's a real CEO for his company. He's got people on the board who they have PhDs, they have patents, the product itself is patented, they've got investors. You would think, hey, they put a whole lot into developing this product, but I guarantee you that he wouldn't have a lot of the problems that he's got today if I weren't coming in after the fact to try to solve them. So it makes so much sense to do all your planning up front. I see one of the questions in chat about, should you have a copyright and should you have a patent when it comes to private label and all those kinds of things. I'm not a patent attorney and I'm not a copyright lawyer or anything like that, but I would say it depends. You don't have to have those things. If you have particularly deep pockets and you've got a product that's going to go somewhere, then it certainly makes sense to have that to protect yourself. But that's one of the interesting catch-22s and great things about Amazon is that you can launch a product, and we've completely changed the whole scope of what it takes to launch a product and what it means to have a brand and what it means to do marketing. All those things have changed fundamentally in the last number of years since the onset of all these things that are happening with Amazon. So it changes the whole structure and the strategy of what you do to launch. And a copyright or a patent may or may not be important for what it is that you're doing. It's kind of a difficult generalized question to answer without seeing the exact product itself. In which case, I still might tell you, hey, yeah, you should go talk to a copyright or patent attorney.
Hey, Scott, good answer. Hey, sticking with the private label question, I have another question that I know personally in our own private label business, and I would like to get your answer on if you dealt with this and what you would suggest for it. I know from a personal thing, we have our own brand out there. It's made for us that we have, and since Amazon doesn't tend to like to remove reviews, is that we have a product that does very, very well, that you have these Chinese distributors or manufacturers jumping on your listing with their fake product, and then that product is going to your client of the listing that you created with your brand, and then it's not the same quality, it's not the same anything. And I know this from facts because what we do, and if people that sell private label don't do this, they should be, we have our competition's product come to us so that we can see what's actually being sent to us, take images and get it back to Amazon, so Amazon knows that it's not our product. Now, it's a process, and Amazon will kick them off at a certain point, but we all know that within 20 minutes, they have another account up in there back on your listing under another name.
Sure.
So we all know that happens. But my question to you is, when it happens and it gives negative reviews on your product or under your product brand, it's very difficult to get that removed. Amazon does not like to remove it, whether or not it's a fake or not. It's just, I know you talked about the other side of the product reviews, and I understand that you got to make your product, make sure the quality of it's right, you got all the information, and you're giving the customer everything they need. But how do you overcome something that's your brand that someone's jumping onto, and you're trying to build your brand, and yet these negative feedbacks come back, and now instead of a 5.0 rating, you're down to a 4.1 because these fakes are getting out to your customers, and there really is nothing you can do about it?
I mean, there are some things that you can do. I don't know how in-depth to go with that. Like, I'm more than happy to tell you all of those things, but it's kind of like giving a kid an AR-16, or an AR-15. It's a powerful weapon. So if I were to share what it is that you can do to combat that, what I don't like about the other side of that, the unintended consequences are the bad people who may use this same information to target you on your own product. So yeah, it's kind of a scary situation because I actually vet a lot of the people who come to me to make sure that I'm helping the person I think I'm helping, as opposed to the competitor of the person I would prefer to be helping. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that there are some very specific steps that you can go through that would be helpful in your scenario, and I've certainly done that for other clients. Sometimes it involves being just a little bit more resourceful than your competition is. In order to succeed at that game of whack-a-mole, you've got to spend a lot of time and focus and energy to fix that. And I've had clients who've noticed those kinds of problems before. And so, for instance, he was a private label seller of supplements, and he had approximately 50 supplements, and his goal was to get to 100 supplements in fairly short order. And I have no doubt that that's something that he was going to achieve. But one of the things that he had noticed over time and experience is he would much rather sell consistently and without headaches and without all these different issues of people jumping onto his product and trying to knock him off, and all these horrible, nefarious types of things that his competitors might be doing. He was happy selling on the 3rd or 5th page instead of trying to be on the 1st page. Instead of spending time, effort, money to be on the 1st page, he felt that he could sell on the 3rd or 5th page much better, much more consistently, without having to have the attention of all these people who are trying to knock him off. That was a good strategy for him, and in some cases that makes a lot of sense. I had a client who came to me. He was in sports and outdoors, and his BSR was 2,400, I think. He had other competitors that were around 4,000, but he was selling just fine, and he was happy, but he wanted it to be better. So I worked with him over a pattern of, let's just say, 3 days. He and I worked together to improve his listing. And within that period of time, his BSR improved from 2,400 to 800, where he was consistently ranking 800. And then not too much longer later, after we took those efforts to improve his product, he got on the radar screen of his competitors. They didn't mind him too much being at 2,400, but at a BSR of 800, they started really kind of pulling out all the stops to take him down. So we addressed all that. We fixed those types of issues, and now he's ranking around 300. So sometimes it's a phase that you go through, but I can tell you that was about a year ago, and he's still dealing with that today. He still has people piling on and trying to sell against his ASIN. You know, despite the fact that he's brand registered, despite the fact that he has control of his listing, he still has people jumping on. And I mean, I helped get rid of those people, but I know that he still has those people because I still get his product in the mail on a fairly regular basis, where somebody places an order for his product from somebody else who has it listed, and then it gets sent to me to do something about it. So it's kind of I still know that he's having those issues because of the fact that I'm still receiving extra product. And of course, I'm helping him with other listings that he's come out with since then. But I don't know. I mean, if you want me to go into that, that's fine. I can tell you what I would do.
Yeah, you can, if you want to elaborate just a little bit. You don't have to go into it deeply, but like I said, our product is ranked like within the top 2,000, 3,000, and it's our own brand. We have several variations of that brand, and it's just like one of those problems that you have. It's just when you sell that kind of volume, like what you just said, when you sell those kind of numbers, you just want to jump on there because you're already getting the traffic for them, and they're going to want to try and sell their product. The bad downside to that is that you are going to have people that have fakes jump on your listings. I know Amazon, I just had Cynthia Stein on, and I know Amazon is going to be working on those issues to kick those counterfeits off more aggressively going forward in 2017. But as of right now, it is kind of an issue, and it does kind of ruin your rating because they are allowed to go on there and do that. It's going to be much tougher, like I said, in 2017. But I'd be interested on, you don't have to go into great detail, but just elaborate a little bit.
I mean, I agree with you, and that's one of the things that concerned me for him once he said, hey, the BSR's improved, but we've got this unintended consequence. Now we're on people's radar. And it concerned me for him. One of the first things was, okay, this is his reputation. These are his product reviews. You've got these people selling these, inferior products. The buyer gets the inferior product. They review the inferior product, and then their review of the inferior product counts against your good product. And that's a huge liability that you can't really do a whole lot to combat. You can't overcome that very well. And like you said, you can identify that, hey, this was not our product, and it's being reviewed as if it was, and Amazon doesn't care. They don't have ears to hear that. So you have to come up with different arguments, and you have to talk about how this is a specific case of review manipulation, right? And you've got to, it's on you to use the right language to get Amazon's attention to that issue in such a way that they actually care. So they care about review manipulation. They don't care about your sales are being affected. It's kind of the way that you appeal to them, and especially if you have various different types of proof that you can offer at the same time. A lot of those types of cases aren't approached very effectively through traditional means like case management. If you just call up seller support, I wouldn't expect you to have any results that were any good at all. If you open cases, maybe, they're iffy, super iffy. You end up needing to send emails to the right departments or to the right email addresses, or to ask for specific types of escalations. Right. But more than that, I think it has a lot to do with, one, you definitely need to have brand registry. It would be, in this case, to answer Mark's previous question, exceedingly helpful for you to have any part of your product or your listing that is protected. So if your photos are protected, if your logos are protected, if your brand name is protected in any way in the form of, let's say, copyright or trademark or whatever, those things are very helpful. And you could end up reporting the buyers, the other sellers that are on your listing, by saying that you're the manufacturer and no one else is authorized to sell this product. So anything else that is being sold on your listing by any other seller is a fake. It's not authentic and it's not authorized. So I think something like that is a sort of strategy that will have more legs, like you were saying, as things proceed here with the way that Amazon's attacking, the counterfeiting. So they used to be much more in a position where they would stress making a test buy. So you can test and you can place the purchase from the other seller. You like you said, take the photographs and submit the case. But if it's your product and it didn't get onto the platform any other way, like it didn't come from your inventory, then you automatically know that it's not correct. That it's counterfeit, that it's not authorized. So to me, that should take out the necessity of having to place a test buy. Why would you place a test buy for something that you already know is fake? Why would you have to prove it that way? Here are your invoices. You're the manufacturer. You're the only one who's authorized to sell it, and this is the only channel. It's kind of a, pretty straightforward argument.
Yeah, you think that, but we've been told by Amazon's compliance department, I know what you're talking about, going through those other channels, that one of the ways that they can prove it's our product, whether it's brand registry or not, they wanted us to get that product, take images, and send it to them. So, but they are going to do away with those things here in 2017 to make it, much more friendly towards people that have brand registry and private label, even to the point where they're going to take your private label product and do like that brand restriction type thing.
Yeah, and I've seen that happening, more and more frequently, and hopefully it'll happen even more. When you have more brand restriction like that, then basically it makes it impossible for anyone to even list against your brand unless they have authorization, and that's what we want. It's a lot of different hoops that it adds, but I think that they're necessary to protect the platform.
Yeah, I think some of their plans in 2017 are definitely. I know a lot of people are upset with all these changes they're making, but a lot of them in reality are going to make the marketplace a much better place to be able to sell on, and it's going to kick off those ones that are not doing the things the way Amazon wants it done. So I agree with that. And I want to get into, I know we talked a bit about private label, but Brian's question's been up here for a while, and he said that, and what would you recommend for a small seller to do or say when applying for a wholesale account? Are there any big don'ts you recommend?
I guess it depends what it is that you're looking to accomplish. I think that it's really easy to be overwhelmed by that type of issue when there's no reason to be overwhelmed. I mean, it's kind of like you just don't know what you don't know, but it's like going to school on the first day. By the second day, it's a whole lot easier, so approaching a wholesale vendor, I mean, essentially you want to explain, hey, I'm looking to acquire your product for the purposes of resale. And I am always very straightforward about where that product is going to be resold if they ask. I don't try to hide, hey, this is going to be on Amazon and eBay. I want them to know that because I would rather know up front that they don't want me as a seller. It makes everything so much easier. And then, in some cases, some of them will want additional information from you. They'll want you to fill out a credit app. They'll want a list of references. They'll want, all your banking information, this kind of thing. I've always been a cash buyer. I've never asked anyone for terms. So I've made that process of filling out that paperwork much easier. It's like, well, they don't need to check your credit references if you're going to be paying with cash. So that sort of eliminates that barrier to entry. If you have a reseller ID, that's something that they typically want, especially they can ask you for a copy of your reseller certificate. If I want to start a business today, after the end of this phone call, I can have my LLC, I can have it incorporated, within an hour, and I can have my reseller certificate and my EIN from the IRS within the next hour, I could have everything I need within 2 hours to essentially fill out all the paperwork that most wholesalers require. So then the next things that are involved are, they want to know where it's going to ship, and maybe they have minimum order quantities. And if you've just never been in that position before, one of the easiest ways that you can open a new wholesale account is to show up at a trade show, because they just change everything. Somebody who I might call right now and say, hey, I'd like to be able to sell your product, they might not give me the time of day. I might not reach somebody. I might, not get in through the filter that they have to work with new clients. Whereas if I talk to that same person at a trade show, I might be filling out a purchase order within 10 minutes. It's just so much easier. They assume a lot of the time, I think, that if you're someone who shows up at a trade show, that if you pass through whatever hoops that were necessary to be able to be eligible to be on the trade show floor, and in addition to the fact that you invested the time, money, and travel to be there, they're ready to sell in a lot of different cases. Not every trade show is that way, but for a lot of trade shows, they're wanting to make sales right there, and you should take advantage of that. And you should take advantage of any specific trade show discounts, whether they're offering 10% off or 15% off, or free shipping with a certain size order. When you go to trade shows, some of the minimums are often reduced. They might tell you that their minimum is 250 or 500 or 1,000, but if you call them, it might be a minimum of 2,000. So there are a lot of benefits to trying to open an account, start a new relationship that way. It is going through a trade show. Now, you don't have to. You can go to a trade show. You can pull up their list of exhibitors and vendors, and you could do everything remotely. And in some cases, that makes a lot of sense. It just depends what you're looking to buy and where you are in your sourcing life cycle.
Yeah, and I agree with Scott, Brian, in a lot of ways. I've got over 30 years of working trade shows, and I can tell you that what Scott was talking about, doing over the phone is one thing. The only thing I would add is that, and I have a book out that I co-wrote with Ryan Rieger called Beyond Arbitrage on Amazon that goes into how to talk to vendors at trade shows and stuff like that. But you want to do your homework before you go to a trade show. You want to make sure that you know the vendors, you know their products, you know everything that they're selling, that you're looking to sell. Make sure it's products that you're interested in. You don't want to be wasting their time at trade shows, because that's the one thing you don't want to be doing. When you're at the trade show, you want to have a layout. You want to know how you want to work the trade show and the companies that you want to see. And the biggest thing of all, and Scott could agree with this, is that you're going to get more out of going to a trade show than you are over the phone, because face-to-face contact means a world of difference compared to speaking to somebody on the phone. And you're going to get other companies as you start to build relationships with these companies. And also at the trade shows, you're going to know what the next best thing is, like, what's the next, movie coming out, and the character that's going to be out. I can tell you one year there was a character that we went to a trade show to, and I asked the guy, I said, what's the next hot thing coming out? He told me, he took me behind the curtain, showed me it. I actually ordered, I don't know, a pallet of this product, had it into Amazon before Amazon even had it, and was selling it well before the time Amazon's order ever hit Amazon. So it definitely has its benefits. And like I said, if you want to learn more about that, there's an inexpensive book on Amazon called Beyond Arbitrage that I co-wrote with Ryan Rieger, and you can take a look at that. I've taken people out on trade show floors as big as the ASD show, take groups of people and walk them out there and show them how I work with the vendors and control the conversation. You want to listen to them, but you also want to control the conversation so that it goes in the direction that you want it to go. Like what Scott was saying, I mean, there's different price structures for different things. Do I avoid it? I don't avoid it, but I don't bring it up unless it's something that I feel I need to. Or I will bring it up during conversation of saying, how do you feel about eBay and Amazon sellers? And they'll come out and they'll tell me. And then that gives me an opening to say, you know what? Well, Amazon doesn't have to be that way, because if you allow me to be an exclusive of your product, I can make sure that we get the bad ones off there and that we hold MAP price. And MAP price is a whole different conversation that we're not going to go into in this webinar, because that'll take a webinar in itself. But it's just some other things that you can do to really make sure you have your information in line when you're talking to the there's that trade show, and understand that Amazon and eBay is not a bad thing. It's just educating the vendors on how it works for them and how you can benefit them. And I think Scott would probably agree with that.
For sure. I mean, you know, one of the things that's interesting about trying to lock up an exclusive distribution agreement is it's really, and it's an advanced strategy. It's not something that everybody should be doing. I couldn't possibly recommend that to everybody I talk to who's doing wholesale. It really only makes sense if you know what you're doing and if you have the bandwidth to be able to follow through, or if you have the relationships to be able to do it. And I put a post out there just this week that said, you know, I would recommend, instead of you trying to come up with all the value propositions that you offer as a seller, if you don't have those value propositions, you're better off saying, I can deliver all these things, I can meet these expectations, I can fix these points of pain, I can offer help with, you know, map management, or I can offer help with, you know, trying to protect your brand. But you shouldn't be trying to make it look like you're the one who's doing it. You should let them know that you have relationships where you will deliver those types of things, because it doesn't take very much time at all for somebody to be able to figure out if you really know what you're talking about. And you'd be far better off saying, hey, you know, I'm a professional seller, I know what I'm doing, I can take care of all these different things, and for the things I don't know about, I have this expert over here that I can rely on to help get these things taken care of for you. I see Mark asked a question about ASD, and I've done the same thing as you have, John. The last couple of years, I've taken people around ASD on, you know, they've paid me to take them for an hour and a half or 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever, and sort of show them the ropes. And I've introduced them to vendors that I've used in the past, and showed them, you know, unique opportunities that they could get into with wholesale or private label, or looking for you know, specific bundle opportunities. You know, the last couple of ASD shows that I've been to, they've been amazing. They've been some of the best ones I've ever been to, but I'm working them differently than I ever have before. I first started out, you know, I was scanning booths and I was trying to find products, and then I started actually looking up vendors and looking at their entire catalog all at once, to instead of spending time looking for an individual item. And then I spent time, you know, looking at all the new products that were introduced and seeing what could happen with those. And this last time I ended up, you know, working deals where I was getting exclusive distribution agreements and partnerships to bring certain products to market. And you know, one booth vendor was saying, hey, you know, I've got this one guy who's got all this cash and he wants to invest in this one type of niche product line, and I was able to help him sort of develop that. And then I came up with a number of other private label ideas that would make sense to have some of the vendors that were there do the custom manufacturing for you. There are all kinds of opportunities, but if you're brand new to the platform, brand new to Amazon, you're looking to do sourcing, I'm not so sure that ASD is the best show for you. It's not that it couldn't be, but if you show up by yourself and you don't have anybody to help you, you might not be, you know, it might not be a good use of your time or your money. Whereas there are other shows going on that, you know, they might take place at the same time or whatever. And I went to one of those shows last time I was ASD, and I wish I'd spent more time there, because it was one of the best shows I've ever seen in terms of opportunity. It was in its infancy in terms of there was no saturation. And then there's another show that takes place in Salt Lake City before that. It's one of the best shows I've ever seen. But sometimes I'm looking at that through different lens, different eyes. They might be incredible shows for me. They might not be as good for somebody else. So it just depends.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. And both you and I are seasonal people, so it's a little bit difficult. We know how to work. We've been through those ropes, and we know. So to answer Mark's questions about the ASD or the other shows, I certainly say if you're going to go to ASD as a first timer, you need to have somebody seasonal with you that knows the ropes and can teach you. The smaller shows are what Scott was talking about. I agree with Scott. That's absolutely the best place to start. First of all, it's not overwhelming. You don't have aisles and aisles of vendors that are going to intimidate you. A lot of the smaller shows have individual booths that you can get more one-on-one attention with the vendors that you couldn't get at ASD, because ASD, the eyes of the vendors are wandering all around for that next big sale. You know, they're trying to find and look for those people that have the big dollars and want to spend. They don't know who you are. So starting out, like a Dallas market, or like the show he set out in Salt Lake City. I know there's a great show out there. The Chicago show, any of the other shows that are out there, the smaller ones. In Orlando, you can always go to the ones that are open all the time out in the Atlanta shoe show or the Atlanta market. There's a ton of stuff down there that you can go through. I would start off small first, and then after you get to know how to work a trade show, then go to ASD, unless you actually have a seasoned person that can actually go to a show with you and kind of help you and walk you through the ropes. There's nothing worse than being an actual, new buyer, working yourself into ASD and being overwhelmed by just the sheer size of it. And Scott will tell you, you better have some good walking shoes on, and you better have a rollaway bag and not carry a handbag, because by the end of the day, your shoulders are going to be killing you and your feet are going to be killing you. So there's a lot of things to take in other than just buying from the trade show. It's just preparing yourself mentally and physically for the trade show when you go to ASD. So from the beginning, if you don't have a seasonal person, I would just get with somebody, go to a smaller show and learn the ropes from those shows, and then move up to ASD, unless you have a seasonal person. And I think Scott would probably tell you the same thing.
You would definitely save yourself a bunch of time and trouble if the person who's taking you around is seasoned and can show you the ropes, and it'd be well worthwhile. And I would agree. You want to go to Orlando first, go to Chicago shows first, go to Dallas, Philadelphia, or whatever. You're going to get more hands-on attention. It would be a better scenario all the way around. I'll tell you, one of the ways that this webinar was billed was, avoiding various pitfalls. And I mean, I've dealt with enough account suspensions and ASIN suspensions in the last couple of weeks that just, makes your head spin, all the different reasons for that. And some of the things that are most common that I'm seeing right now are, you have all the typical stuff like used, sold as new and not as described, the inauthentic complaints. You see a lot of safety violations that are coming through. A lot of those have to do with seals on products not staying sealed. The safety seal comes undone, or you're not tracking your expiration dates is a possible issue. I will tell you, if you sell any products right now on the platform, or you're looking to sell any products that have expiration dates, you need to absolutely familiarize yourself with the expiration date policies, condition guidelines that Amazon puts out there. Just go to help and type in condition guidelines. Go to help and type in expiration date policies. And you absolutely need to abide by those. If you can become familiarized with those, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble. You need to have a 90-day window for expiration issues, and especially for consumables, for grocery, for health and personal care, for beauty. I would recommend not buying those products from liquidators or closeouts. I'm not saying that you can't do it. I'm not saying that I don't know people who do that successfully, but as a broad rule, with paint with a broad brush, I would tell you it's not worth it. You're going to get into trouble if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not seasoned, if you don't understand the platform and all the different correct questions to ask about how to get into something like closeouts or liquidations. If you're not familiar with everything that you need to know about that, you're probably asking for trouble. It might be really lucrative, but it might be really jeopardizing your account. And I would encourage really reevaluating those categories and those types of items for those types of things. The other thing I would say is I see more and more of a trend, and you probably talked about this with Cynthia, I see more and more of a trend of the things that are going on with gating, with brand registry, with product gating, with brand gating, all those types of things. And it looks to me like your safest bet long term that everybody should be looking at is to be authorized to sell the products they sell. So I've worked with a lot of people who are selling RA, retail arbitrage, and OA, online arbitrage recently, and you can do that, and it's lucrative, but you better know what you're doing. Just buying a product and just making it set fit this set criteria, these filters that you put in place for yourself, where maybe it's small, maybe it's light, maybe it's a good BSR and good margin. That's important for sourcing, but it's not as important overall for protecting your account. Like if you're talking about account protection, it's sort of a little bit of a different animal, and you've got to make sure that you begin to add that as a filter for your sourcing as well. So like right now, if you're all RA and OA, or if you source thrift shops or anything like that, Goodwill, what have you, your products aren't ones that you can easily defend as far as you have specific authorization from the manufacturer to sell them. Those are some of the biggest things that I'm seeing right now. I was working with somebody who was suspended for selling Barbie. That might be a specific instance where they're in Australia and they're selling on the U.S. platform, and apparently there are some things that are happening right now where Amazon's restricting more and more international sellers who are acquiring these products through RA and OA, and I don't really know why, but I just see that as a pattern. I see some of the same thing with Mattel, and I've had a lot of clients who receive performance notifications for CK, for Calvin Klein, and I'll give you a specific example of what happened there. Somebody got a hold of me, and a client, and they said, hey, I got a performance notification for Calvin Klein underwear I was selling. What should I do? And I can say, and I was able to say, hey, this is what I would do. I know that there's a difference of agreement on what the correct thing is to do in a situation like that. In my opinion, I see that as something that is writing on the wall, and that you should get out of CK immediately. You should get all of your CK inventory out of your catalog of inventory, not just the specific ASINs that they cited you for. And then you need to reply to the rights owner, and then you need to let Amazon know exactly what you've done, what caused the problem. You didn't have authorization to sell the product, what you've done to fix it. You got rid of all the inventory that you had, and you will no longer sell that product, and that you've gotten a hold of the rights owner to let them know that you're in complete compliance, and you've asked them to remove their complaint. And then the third thing, your plan of action for what you're going to do to prevent that from happening again in the future, is you're going to be sourcing all of your inventory from people that are telling you that you're authorized to sell it. That third thing is something that should apply to all of your sourcing, and if it doesn't now, I would encourage you to start thinking about it that way. And that sort of segues into the whole question about going to trade shows or buying from wholesalers, that sort of thing. I think some of your best opportunities for bringing products onto the platform may, one, come from products that are not currently on the platform, or two, manufacturers that are local to you that you can contact directly and have a relationship with. So, I happen to have several friends locally that own businesses, and they do their own manufacturing. Some of those products might be products that are not currently on Amazon that there could be demand for, or that I could create demand for and create the listings. It's a little bit of a longer sell. It's not shooting fish in the barrel, but it's certainly a lot safer because I have a specific authorization to help them bring their products onto the platform. Or I might even have an exclusive distribution agreement to be able to sell those products. I bought something from a guy here locally. I bought a weight set from him, an Olympic weight set. Went down, visited his house, picked it up there. We got into a conversation about what does he do, and he runs a plastics manufacturing company, one of the larger plastics and castings manufacturing companies in the country. And I went down and visited his plant about an hour and a half from me. Turns out he's got at least 3 or 4 different products that I could carry and that he could custom manufacture for me. Those types of things are all over the place. They're right next to you. They're in the industrial center in your town. They're in commercial areas where a lot of manufacturing and distribution and those types of things are taking place. It would make sense to search locally as opposed to trying to find something that a whole bunch of people are already looking at that's being offered for sale at a trade show.
Yeah. Hey, Scott. I did find something out from Cynthia Stein the other night that I wasn't even aware of, and I think a lot of sellers that you hit the nail on the head when you said they're not even aware. Retail arbitrage and online arbitrage. I was not even aware of this. A lot of people think that you can go in and get these invoices from Walmart or these places that you buy from, and you can use those as legitimate to Amazon. Well, Amazon's doing away with those. They're not going to be using those. And one of the things that Cynthia Stein told me that was a wake-up call is that Walmart or Target may be able to sell a Mattel toy in their store, but they may not be authorized to sell it to resellers to sell on Amazon or eBay and places like that. And that was kind of a wake-up call, because you're going in there doing retail arbitrage thinking it's name brand, it's Barbie, it's Mattel, it's Fisher-Price. But here's the key. The key is that, yes, those stores have those products in there, but those stores may not be authorized to sell it to resellers, contract with Fisher-Price or Mattel or Hasbro or any of these places to be able to do that. So when you go in there and you buy it, you are taking a risk that if that product gets on Amazon and there's something that's going on, you can get kicked off of that. If Hasbro comes to Amazon and says, hey, listen, they're not authorized to sell it. I did not know that. I thought brand names in the stores, you could go in and you could do retail arbitrage and online arbitrage. And I think people on this call need to pay very, because that's a trend that's happening on Amazon, where they're getting a lot of pressure from these brands saying, we sold that to this company, it should not be on Amazon.
It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time before you get a notification. I've seen several ASIN suspensions and account suspensions where someone sold one thing, one product of one brand. Then the rights owner sent in a complaint. They had enough of those. Maybe it took 2 rights owner complaints. Maybe it took 3. Maybe it was 2 rights owner complaints along with a inauthentic complaint, and that person suspended. And the majority of those complaints either take place from the things I mentioned before about like a safety seal or about an expired product, or they take place because of product condition, where the buyer received something that was not in the condition that they expected it to be in because you didn't necessarily take enough care with packaging. I've seen so many people who say, oh, well, even if you buy it from a wholesale vendor and you buy it in replenishable case pack and you got, 24 of them, that retail ready packaging is not something that's suitable to be able to make it all the way through the process of you bought it or it was shipped to you and then you shipped it to Amazon and then it got pulled and placed in an inventory bin at Amazon and then it got picked and packed and then it made it all the way to the consumer. The chance of that retail ready packaging being good enough shape to be able to protect the packaging itself and the product all the way to consumer isn't very great. Those aren't dice I'd want to roll. And you're responsible for that. Amazon sees you as specifically responsible for that entire process all the way to the buyer, even if you're FBA. The dirty little secret is FBA is great, but it doesn't protect you in an event like that.
Yeah,
you're still
absolutely
responsible. And I've seen people still using Walmart or Target or TJ Maxx or Marshalls or Ross receipts, and they still get out of trouble with those, but not in every case. It's not nearly as bulletproof as being able to provide an invoice with your company. That's the other thing I was going to mention is in terms of avoiding pitfalls, right? Invoices need to look a certain way. You think, oh, I've got an invoice. Well, that's not good enough. It's got to have your Amazon name on there. So if you're known by such and such buy and sell, that's the name that you want on the invoice. You don't want your company name. Your company name might be I'm John Incorporated. That's not what should be on your invoice. Your invoice should be your Amazon name. And then it should be the Amazon phone number that's on the invoice. That might be a different phone number than the one that you use to do business with. You might call up a supplier and say, hey, I'm ABC Company and here's my phone number, but you might have a different phone number for customer service on Amazon. They need to match. And the other thing that needs to match is your email address. The same email address that you use to log into Seller Central needs to be the email address that's on that invoice. And the address needs to be the same as well. You got to have all those things in place on that invoice in order for that invoice to be something that's easily accepted by Amazon to verify. And those same kinds of things need to show up from the vendor. The vendor needs to have the name of the company. It needs to have their address, needs to have their phone number and email address on their website. And it's kind of crazy. It's a lot of hoops to jump through, but you're far more likely to have all that information on your invoice in a verifiable way if you're buying directly from a manufacturer or a wholesaler or a distributor that you have a relationship with. You're not going to get that as easily or as well from buying something online or RA, and you're certainly not going to get it from a thrift store. So, or a garage sale. There are just so many different things like that not everybody knows. It makes it a lot easier to jump through these hoops if you have any kind of a problem. When you say those invoices or those receipts not being accepted by Amazon, if it's a Walmart receipt or Target receipt or whatever, I think that it's possible they still could be. It's just, do you really want to bet your whole account on that? You know, it's not a cut and dry deal. It's not a absolute. But I started out by saying, you know, I see the trends going. Amazon wants you to be authorized to sell the products that you're selling, and you're absolutely correct, and Cynthia is absolutely correct that when you go buy, you know, such and such Louisville Slugger baseball bat from Walmart, that does not mean that you've been given authorization to sell that product on Amazon. Now, legally, it does. First sale doctrine, all that kind of stuff, legally, you're protected. But we're not talking about legality. We're talking about Amazon world. And Amazon world is different. The rules are fundamentally different. And you've got to put on that type of thinking in order to be effective, in order to be safe, in order to be protected.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm just going to get off a little bit subject here because Roxana has 3 questions here. I don't know if you can see them. I just want to get them addressed. I feel bad for her that I see her questions up here. Can you see them, or do you want me to?
I can see them. I can see the question about what's the most effective way to get ungated. Honestly, I had an hour and a half long webinar on just that issue with Startup Bros. It's a long conversation. I mean, if you want to talk about all the different strategies and all the different pitfalls and all the different things to avoid and, you know, best practices, that really, it's like an hour and a half conversation. So I don't want to avoid that, but it's a big subject. You know, we could sit here and write a book on that. One of the things I would say, you know what, if you want to email me, I can send you a data sheet that I put together. It was a handout that basically describes probably 90% of what you need to know in a nutshell. I can probably put that in here. I don't know how you distribute that kind of information, but it was fairly comprehensive, and it would answer a lot of those questions.
If you have a link or something like that, Scott, you can post it. I don't know if you have a link to it.
I'd have to find it. I don't know. Is that something maybe you could post that?
Yeah, if you get the link to that and just PM me on Facebook and send it to me, I'll put it in the YouTube video after so that they can go there and get that information if they need to.
Okay, I think that makes sense because, I mean, it's valuable information, but it's pretty hard to convey in a short period of time. Let's see. Is it easier to get ungated when you have a private labeler or you have an authorization from the manufacturer to sell? That's actually 3 different questions kind of all wrapped up into one, and they sort of need separated out. Having authorization from the manufacturer to sell might mean that you could become brand registered. You have they have a specific form they want you to fill out for brand authorization. In some ways, that can be easier for ungating because then you don't have to provide as many invoices that need to be acquired and approved. So you could perhaps provide the letter from the manufacturer and a website, and that helps you get brand registered. And then the next step is when you go to get approval for the category, you don't need to provide as much information. When you're trying to get approved for a category with private label products, it can be pretty challenging, especially if you have invoices from companies that are not in the U.S. So if you are importing from somewhere, China or wherever, getting approved for categories with those invoices is nearly impossible. I wouldn't even try. The other thing I would recommend, just kind of in a nutshell, is wait until Q4 is over. They've really, really clamped down in Q4. It's nearly impossible to get ungated in some categories now. Some people just walk right in and they get ungated immediately, and it's no big deal, and they post in a Facebook group and say, hey, what's the big deal? It was easy for me. This is what I did. But that doesn't mean it's going to work for you, unfortunately. It's kind of like, working out. You might go to the gym and you see somebody who's completely ripped and buff and whatever, and they don't even really have to work that hard. They got great genetics, and what they do is going to be completely different than what's successful for you. And it's the same thing. It really is. You could follow everything that they did to a T. They could even do it for you, and you still might not be successful. I'm not saying you shouldn't try. I really personally believe everybody should try to get ungated on their own. They shouldn't hire someone who's a service provider. And that's coming from somebody who is a service provider. I can get you ungated in a category. I'm recommending you do it yourself. Learn what it takes to get ungated. Understand, even though that might not even be the best source use of your time, the steps that you have to go through and the things that you need to understand are important for you to understand. You might never use a flat file. You might never, it might not matter one bit if you understand flat file feeds. I still think it's important for you to have a familiarity with what it is and what it does and how it works. It's still important. There are a lot of powerful opportunities available with flat files that people take advantage of. And if you're not doing that, you should at least become familiar with it so that you can know if that's something that would make sense for you that would save you a bunch of time and money. There was another question Roxana asked. A local manufacturer of private label products, when you're doing business that way, do you need any authorization from them since it's going to be your own brand? I'm not really sure is the answer to that. I think it certainly wouldn't hurt. It would be very helpful if you did have that, because at some point in time you might actually need it. Generally, they're manufacturing something for you to resell, I think could be considered to be sort of a tacit approval. But if you can get specific approval, that's even better.
Yeah. Hey, one thing I want to add too, I don't know if we have any brand new people listening that are not on Amazon, but if they are not on Amazon and they want to be on Amazon, I don't know why I have an echo in the background, but Amazon is changing the rules come the end of this year. So if you're not a seller, it's going to get much harder to become a seller on Amazon going forward in 2017. The process is not going to be, from what Cynthia Stein told me, you're not going to be able to just sign up and get registered and sell on Amazon. There's going to be a process involved. It's going to take a while before they approve you. Have you heard that, Scott?
I haven't heard it, but if that's what's happening, I'm thankful. I think it needs to be that way. I think they need to have a bigger barrier to entry so that not just anybody can sell. And that would actually end up, in the long run, help prevent the kinds of sort of draconian enforcement procedures that we are all currently subject to. They wouldn't need to have as heavy of a hand if they did a better job up front preventing sellers from jumping on the platform who really shouldn't be.
Hey, Scott's had great information tonight, guys. And if you want information that's kind of what Scott, on the same basis as what Scott's talking about, the webinar I did last week, actually Tuesday, with Cynthia Stein, you can see all her information of things that are upcoming with Amazon and changes that are being made. And you can catch that at my MIT webinars on YouTube if you want more information on that. Hey, Scott, I don't want to hold you up any longer. It's been over an hour. I know we were looking at, said we can't go an hour. We went an hour easy. And if anybody wants to reach out and get in touch with you, how can they do that? Can you post something in the chat so they can
did that show up?
Yeah, it did. Feedbackrepair.com.
Yeah, that works pretty well.
And that's the only way that you want them to get in touch with you, is through feedbackrepair.com.
They can call me. I put my email address in there. That's my cell phone. Those are pretty safe. I mean, you can get a hold of me via Facebook.
Yeah, and guys, Scott putting his phone number out there like that just shows you the kind of person he is, because that shows you that he's here, he's willing to help, and he wants you to be successful. And that's kind of what this show is all about. We want to bring guests in here that are willing to help you guys grow your business. And we appreciate Scott coming in here and spending his time. And you guys being here again on a Thursday night. We know that you could be doing other things, and the fact that you were here, and hopefully you got a lot of valuable information. I know I've learned some things from Scott. I always say that, no matter how long you've been doing this business or been around, you can always learn something new all the time. And Scott taught me a few things about Amazon and some of the things that, I can be doing that maybe I'm not doing. And hopefully you guys got a lot of good information that you can use. You've got the information up there to be able to get a hold of Scott if you guys want to reach out to him. I'm sure he's available for you guys through his www.feedbackrepair.com. He give you his phone number up there and other ways to be able to reach him on Skype. Scott, I always give my God bless you, man. Have a nice Christmas and holiday, and I always give my guest the last word to be able to take us out.
Hey, well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been enjoyable. So, any opportunity to help people out and keep them from getting into these pitfalls that they don't need to fall into, I think that's valuable. And so, I appreciate that opportunity. Thanks for letting me be on, sharing with you.
My pleasure, Scott. You were awesome, and like I said, have a nice holiday, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, Merry Christmas. Take care.
Okay, take care.